about Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. That's right, it's no longer just Ant-Man, right? We had the first Ant-Man film, and then we had Ant-Man and the Wasp because we had to give the female character top billing, and now that's just perpetual. Now it's just always going to be Ant-Man and the Wasp, and now it's Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. Sounds a lot like WrestleMania. From Deadline, though, the early projections are saying that this is going to be a franchise best of a $280 million global opening weekend. It says here, the tentpole drought created by the pandemic's post-production logjam is officially over this weekend as Disney and Marvel's Ant-Man and the Wasp opens the floodgates on what is a consistent flow of event movies from this Friday until early September. Oh, Deadline. Oh, Deadline. Who wrote this? Who wrote this? This is Nancy. Yeah, it's Tony and Nancy, my favorite box office people. Tony and Nancy over at Deadline. Oh, my goodness. Oh, it's officially over, everyone. The pandemic's post-production logjam. It's like, wait a minute. Are you trying to basically say that the pandemic's over again? I thought that you were still running with that narrative every now and then, saying, well, we're still kind of in the midst of this pandemic. It's like, I got news for you. I got the numbers. And the numbers aren't looking all that great. They're not looking all that great. But yes, a consistent flow of event films, meaning a consistent flow of films that are ultimately going to disappoint us. Is that what you mean? As it says, early tracking 4 weeks ago indicated a $120 million opening weekend for U.S. and Canada over the 4-day President's Day holiday. Disney is hoping for at least $95 million over 3 days and $105 to $110 over 4. Either way, a franchise record start and a great 25% surge from the 3-day opening of 2018's Ant-Man and the Wasp, $75.8 million. That, of course, is, you know what I'm going to say, without adjusting for inflation. Now, I will say I've broken down the numbers, and this will indeed be the best performance, if these numbers hold, of the Ant-Man franchise. That actually I can confirm as a fact, and I will show you the numbers. Adjusted for inflation, and even more so, I will give you the projected ticket sales for the domestic opening weekends of all 3 films. That's right. I did some research. I did some number crunching. We all love numbers here. We all love some charts. I got a new chart for you. We'll see if I ever have the time to do full chart breakdowns for it, but anyway, I digress. It goes on to say, as is standard, there are no other Frosh-wide releases from rival studios. With the Peyton Reed-directed threequel kicking off overseas Wednesday, it's looking like around $160 million for a global start of $280 million. That includes, there it is, $35 to $55 million from China. That's right. So already starting off with tens of millions of dollars going to the CCP. Great job, MCU. Great job, Disney. What I also find funny, too, is people were calling me out for my coverage of Avatar. It's like, clearly you've never seen me cover the MCU before. Not to mention, guess what? They're all owned by the same company. People. But as you can see, millions of dollars going to China. And again, this movie likely does not need any of this money. And in fact, that means if this film didn't have it, you're still looking at a $220 million opening weekend or so. That's a decent opening. It's not great, but that's a decent opening. As it says, tracking remains slightly unpredictable for big films, even as the pandemic has eased. Wait, so it hasn't gone away. It's just eased. Flip-floppers. But with Jonathan Majors' new mega MCU villain, Kang the Conqueror, making his big screen debut after his variant's introduction in Marvel Disney's series Loki, that could create a stampede of walk-up business this coming weekend. Now, I've always been one to say, and I'll give some credit here, that walk-up business is normally not accounted for, and it's hard to predict. But to try and say that Kang the Conqueror, based at least on the trailers that I've seen, is somehow, some way going to be enough and going to be that which is able to bring in off the street. I mean, are you serious? Now, everything I've heard from the reviews, I've watched the coverage that I've seen John Flickinger's coverage, good friend, right? You saw the video, the podcast episode earlier today on the channel that I released. as a kind of like a teaser of, hey, get more content like this by joining. But I saw his coverage of it, and he said it was okay film. Right? He said it was okay. I saw Jeremy John's coverage of this, and he's someone I tend to agree with more so than not. There are definitely things that I don't agree with Jeremy Johns with, but Jeremy Johns said that this film is a good time if you're drunk. That's one of his lower ratings. And the only positive thing he had to say about the film was Kang. Right? Kang was supposedly amazing in the film. The problem, though, is that the trailer does not really convey that. Nothing about the trailer makes me think, oh, I want to see more of this guy. I see, oh, generic bad guy. Why should I care? Amidst the really terrible CGI background, which also being confirmed by the people who have seen the film, the CGI is apparently atrocious for a huge portion of the film too. I question the whole walk-up mentality. But again, we will, of course, see when the numbers come in. What's interesting, though, of course, is as soon as they're, as you saw, all this is really fluffing up, right? Saying, oh, look at all these great things and all these great numbers. And then it's like, currently, though, domestic advanced ticket sales for Ant-Man 3 are tracking 15% behind Thor: Love and Thunder, which opened to 144.1 million over 3 days. Disney has all the IMAX 400, PLF about 900, D-Box, and 3D. So these are all the premium format screens. This is what I was talking about, by the way, with Avatar. The reason why Avatar's numbers were so high was not only because you had a lot of people going to watch the film, but also these were the auditoriums, these were the screens that they were going to see. The 2D screens were almost empty opening weekend for Avatar. These films were almost filled to the brim in certain cases, which is the reason why I would love to get a number on, and I might need to get in touch with Valiant Renegade, because Valiant Renegade, I believe, was actually tracking the average ticket price at his local theater. So, hey, it's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. And he was trying to say, here's the average ticket sales and ticket price for Avatar specific versus the typical movie that doesn't have a 3D release, that doesn't have an IMAX release, that doesn't have a X release. So that to me would honestly, I think, be the best indicator and best way of figuring out how many actual tickets were sold, at least domestically. Internationally, there's just no way for us to be able to come to that conclusion. But what this means is that we could likely expect these screens to be much better sellers than the alternative. And by the way, that's right, 2,500 3D screens. This is, once again, a big part of the Avatar effect. Remember how 3D kind of went away for a long time? And it was awesome because no one really wanted to watch films in 3D because it's mostly just a gimmick? Well, guess what? Avatar comes back out, and what happens? Oh, wait, now we're going to start to get a bunch of 3D showings again. Great. Ant-Man 3 will start Wednesday in France, Korea, Germany, and Italy before putting up its antenna in essentially all overseas markets through Friday. Turkey is being delayed amid the humanitarian crisis. Absolutely. By the way, prayers going out to Turkey and Syria. I mean, oh my goodness, the earthquakes there, the hundreds of thousands of people's lives, just breaks my heart. Goes on, though. Currently, Rotten Tomatoes reviews are at 63% fresh off of 70 at the time of the post, which is under the 87% certified fresh of Ant-Man and the Wasp and the 83% certified fresh of Ant-Man. By the way, it also mentions the completely worthless cinema score of an A and an A minus. Again, cinema score, they don't actually give you any of the data. They just say, take our word for it. We put people out there, and the score that we got back was an A. It's a joke. Rotten Tomatoes is a joke as well. So that's why I use neither of them and instead use something that all of us can agree with is at the very least half decent. Not good, but half decent in Metacritic. It goes on to say the previous Ant-Man skewed 60% male to 62%. Once again, reaffirming that, yes, the vast majority of people going to see these films are male. Silly MCU, silly Disney. Ant-Man 3 is the first MCU title to release in China in step with domestic since Disney Marvel's Avengers Endgame and Sony Marvel's Spider-Man Far From Home in 2019, the latter having gone a week early. It's also only the second Marvel title to be given a China date since Far From Home. Disney's Black Panther Wakanda Forever was granted a window earlier this month, basically as a primer. And again, I've not really seen a whole lot as far as numbers are concerned there. Let's talk about, though, some of these numbers, all right? Because I did some digging. So what you have here is a nice little chart that I put together, all right? And what I have is the total estimates of the opening weekend, right? This is the opening weekend. I need to put that total domestic opening. There we go. Just to make it clear. So as you can see, Ant-Man in 2015 made, when adjusted for inflation, $73.2 million. By the way, how did I get this number? Well, it opened to $57 million. A dollar back then is worth $1.28 today. That is coming from BLS. That's, again, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. That's official government website. I don't know whether or not that makes it more legitimate or less legitimate, but hey, that makes sense to me. A dollar today is worth $1.28 back in 2015. That seems to check out. That seems to make sense. So that would mean that in today's dollars, the film made $73 million. That would mean that because the average ticket price was around $8.42, that opening weekend domestically, Ant-Man, the first one, sold 6.7 million tickets. Ant-Man and the Wasp, again adjusted for inflation, the dollar today was worth $1.21 back then, according to reports. It opened to $75.8 million, meaning that it actually opened to 91.7 in today's dollars, meaning that when you take into account ticket prices, which on average jumped to $9.11, and really it's been that way ever since then, it sold 8.3 million tickets in its opening domestic weekend. Again, this is just the domestic weekend. The projection is from Disney that they think the film will open domestically to $95 million, based off of the fact that we are still at an average ticket price of around $9.17. Now, I have got questions about this because that is the average ticket price of all movies, and that goes for all three of these. Where I honestly think when it comes to these, we probably should have a higher estimate because most of the tickets being sold, or at least a large portion of the tickets being sold, are probably from premium format screens. But since it's hard for us to really pinpoint exactly what that is, we have to use whatever the average ticket price is. And right now, the average ticket price for 2023 is around $9.17 per ticket. So if indeed the film makes $95 million, that means that the movie will have sold around 10.5 or rather 10.3 million tickets. Now, this is interesting because it does indeed show that even when you adjust for inflation, this will be the highest opening of the Ant-Man franchise. But what it also shows is that this movie is set to have a massive marketing campaign, making this film on almost like Avengers level. Like they're trying to make this event, right, the quantum realm. They're trying to make this out to be the big, like something so huge. So even though it is an increase, look at these numbers. 2 million extra tickets sold between the first and second film. 2 million extra tickets sold between the second and third. That's not that large of a jump. And then when you have the numbers for inflation adjusted, a $4 million increase from the second movie. Okay, I mean, yeah, that's the greatest of the franchise so far. And this is only the domestic numbers, right? This is not taking into account the international numbers. And obviously, international does bring something else to the table. But what this does show me is that, oh boy, they could be in some trouble. This was not a cheap film to make. This was not a cheap movie to make. But as you can see, ticket prices, or rather the ticket sales, the difference between them really isn't all that impressive. And these are films, right? The Ant-Man films have not really been known for being the highest grossing of the movies. The history of the fact that this is not getting very good reviews. So there are no actual audience ratings yet because it has only been released for critics. But look at this score from Metacritic, a 50. Out of the 39 critic reviews, so there are still more on the way, the vast majority have been mixed. 20 mixed reviews, 13 positive, 6 negative. Compare that to the score of 70 for Ant-Man and the Wasp, which had 42 positive, 14 mixed, and 0 negative. And then the first Ant-Man, which had a score of 64, 28 positive, 15 mixed, and 1 negative. So it is interesting to me to look at these numbers and to see these numbers in this way, because this raises the question: if these movies saw marginal increases, and if you look at the overall critic scores, there's a marginal increase in positivity, how in the world is this film expected to also have a marginal increase when the reviews are a lot less? Now, again, to be fair, 39 reviews versus 56 reviews versus 44 reviews, but still enough for us to make that comparison and to ask that question. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Patreon, locals, and Subscribe Star members who are at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above, starting off with Father Luca Illich, Garrett Searles, Chris from the 80s, who you can check out over on YouTube by the same name, Hymir Irie Hymason, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Orange Hat Reviews, you can check out at his YouTube channel by the same name as well, Laura, the Modern Major General Story, Rosetta Allen, who you can check out at her YouTube channel, Eagle Rider, and Miss Martin Muses, which goes by the same name on YouTube. Thank you all very much for supporting me over on Patreon. And also for my Subscribe Star peeps, we got Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name. Fast Reaction, Mr. Roy, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man, who you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co. And also, lastly, to my locals members, starting off with Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan, How About a Hockey Player, J.H. Schwalbach, Brett D90, and the amazing lawyer Robert Barnes. Thank you all very much for supporting me for the month of February. You guys are all fantastic. If you want your name shouted out, access to exclusive podcasts, and exclusive giveaways, check out the top link in the video description below. Anyway, you guys are all great. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. And as always, God bless.